Hello folks, it is time for some more hobby nightmares. If you enjoy what I do, then please make sure you like the video. It does amazing things for the channel in the algorithm and helps us out as we try to grow so more people can get what they need out of hobby nightmares. Lots to go through today. Let's jump right in with Ken, who says, "Hello North." Hello Ken. Sorry I haven't been able to write back as quickly as I would have liked. Work, a move, and a prescient chest cold has been keeping me rather busy. I'm glad you enjoyed the drawings and pics. I did last time, yes, they were very nice. I'd be happy to talk about some sort of collaboration you hinted at. My Krieg army is now complete. My first fully painted and WYSIWYG in almost a decade. I really put my nose to the grindstone at the end of June so I could attend a tournament about an hour from my apartment. I actually got a bit ahead of my painting schedule, so I travelled to the store, that I've never been to before, to scout out the field a bit. I bought a pack of resin cacti and static grass to add to my Krieg bases. I saw another gorgeous Krieg army in a winter theme and a Thousand Suns army that were half painted. I didn't speak to the players as I didn't want to interrupt. With my scouting mission complete, I returned home via the scenic route through the mountains. The day of the tournament, I overslept. I work third shift, so early morning is essentially my late evening. I tried to nap and set an alarm, but I was pretty exhausted. I had joined their Discord group the previous day to ask about any specifics for the event, so I made a comment about oversleeping and that I was on my way. To my surprise, they all waited for me to arrive. Well, how polite of them, how nice. I scrambled over to my table with my makeshift boxes full of pieces of pluck foam, greeted my opponent, and we began. Now, before I get into this nightmare, let me explain a few things. I haven't played much 40k in recent years. My glory days were the 3rd and 4th editions of the game. I wasn't a big fan of 5th, but still played it a bunch. 6th edition was mostly games in the living room with my roommate, but he was more interested in fantasy, so we played it with the graph paper cutouts and a few more high models to define unit heights. 7th edition I completely ignored until a friend pointed out that I had one of the most broken Eldar armies just sitting in boxes in my closet. I played for a bit, but I don't like power gaming, and Wave Serpent and Scatterbike spam was getting old fast. 8th edition I didn't even look at. I took a look at 9th and just shook my head in disappointment. Eventually Nick, my friend from my previous story who introduced me to 40k, talked me into playing at the very tail end of 9th. We played 3 games and hated every single second of it. I think I know why you hated it, to be honest with you, when it comes to, stratagems and things. We spent more time talking about how much better the old days were than actually trying to get the game going. We then decided to make our own rules to play by ourselves, and the day after, we wrote a decent outline. 10th edition was then announced. We played 3 games and found it more to our liking, so I started collecting the Death Corps of Krieg. Simply put, I was going into this tournament as pretty much a new player with a light understanding of the rules and using an army I'd never tried before in any edition. I also hold older versions of the game in far higher regard than more modern editions. Well, you've made a mistake here, my friend, and I'm sure you'll know what I mean. I am aghast at the amount of hobby nightmares that come in, where a player says, yeah, I've got this army, I don't know how to play it, but, I'm going to go to a tournament and see how I do. Oh, it didn't go very well. Oh, what a hobby nightmare. No, it's not. Like, you don't know how to play your army, and you're going to a tournament. Right? That's not the place to figure out how to do your army. It's going to make hobby nightmares if you do that. Don't do that. Game 1. My opponent was playing Emperor's Children. As we prepared to set up, he asked, "Are you using random or set secondaries?" To which I responded, I don't know what that means. He laughed a moment and pulled out a deck of cards. He started to explain, but in truth, my eyes glazed over and anything he said went in one ear and out the other. He put some cards in front of me while explaining, and I just pointed at 2 and said, I'll do those. I picked Bring It Down, and honestly I don't remember the other one. I'm a very casual player. I really don't care about missions. I think the idea of stratagems are dumb and secondaries or whatever are completely pointless in my own mind. Yeah, secondaries are not my bag either, to be honest with you. I don't care how many victory points you or I have. He who kills the most stuff wins as far as I'm concerned. May seem a bit weird, I'd even go to a tourney, but I live an hour from anything, and if I'm driving that far, I want as many games in one day as I can get. Fair enough, you know, I can get along with that. We deploy our forces and begin. After 3 hours, the time was called. We had made it to the bottom of turn 3. I don't remember much other than a lot of explaining about how the terrain worked, and I forgot every single army rule I had. Used one stratagem because my opponent reminded me that I had it, and basically didn't really have any fun. Again, I'm gonna say this right now, dude. You're an architect of your own demise. You really are. You've not learnt your rules and you've gone to a tournament. I mean, I am gonna be honest here, and this is gonna sound really harsh. Can we please protect tournament players? I know that sounds weird. I'm a big casual person. I'm a casual fanboy. I'm not a tournament person. But let's leave the tournament players to have their own space if we can. Let's not turn up not knowing our rules and not knowing what the core rules of the game are. That'll be really, really, really frustrating. That's kind of like somebody coming into a casual game and playing for blood and trying to whack you off the table at the top of turn 2. Do you know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing, but in reverse. Let's try and respect the fact that it's a tournament and learn some rules before we go. You know, I understand, mate, that you've got your work schedule and stuff. Maybe just sit down one evening over a cup of tea or something and just go over the rules and play a few practice games with some coins just to get used to what the rules do and what your army book does and things like that. So at least you're going to the tournament and you're not bogging down this other person's game so that you only get to turn 3, right? I don't think you only got to turn 3 for 1 second because the game is bad, which it is. I think you only got to turn 3 because you don't know your rules! And you kept having to go over them every time, right? Anyway, moving on. Game 2. My opponent this time had Tau, a lovely army that was almost a mirror of my own. It was made up of 3 hammerheads, some devilfish, and a few stealth units, amongst other things. I thought it was cool to see a Tau armoured company, and he and his girlfriend with him, who were supportive but clearly very bored. I rolled the first turn and hammered his army pretty bad. I could tell that within a few short moments I had taken all the wind out of his sails. However, his return fire was equally devastating. The rail cannon blew my Dawn to scrap, because I forgot I could ignore damage with an ability. And the bottom of turn 2, I conceded to his shock. "You could still pull a win, man," he exclaimed. "Nah, it's alright," I said. "I'm down to mostly chimeras and troops, and in all honesty, I really don't feel like setting up these troops to just have to pick them right up, do you know what I mean?" I laughed. He kept asking if I was sure. I told him I was totally fine with it, and explained my casual nature. I didn't come here to win, dude, it's all good. He and his girl turned out to be the chill ones that actually spoke to me during the lunch break. They too had driven an hour to get there. It was clear to us that we were the outsiders. All the others were sitting at the same table in the neighbouring pizza place, completely ignoring us. Again, alright. Okay. Again. Here's another thing about casual players. Look at me just going after my own tribe. But let me just preface this. Okay? If there is a group of people who are having fun, right? It is not their job to go out of their way to include you. It's your job to introduce yourself, and for them to go, and then it's their job to be nice and to go, "Oh, cool, yeah, come and join us," you know? If you're just sitting in another restaurant looking at them through a window going, "They're sitting together in the pizza place, all together and ignoring us." No, they're not. They're friends, and they're in another place, just having fun. They're not gatekeeping you. If you go over and say hello, they'll be like, "Hey man, pull up a pew," right? No, just chill. Like they're not trying to. I don't know, man. I don't know. They're not ignoring you. They don't know you exist. They need to know you exist to ignore you. Okay, just go with that. Go with that. Don't take everything to heart. You know what I mean? You live longer. Game 3. 1,000 Suns, and this is where the true nightmare really begins. This guy was one of those rules lawyering types. Triple measured every distance, checked and rechecked angles over and over. Now personally, I hate models like the Primarchs. I'm very much in the old camp of, you know, make your own heroes. This game was torturous and dull. Constant explanations about, these are Cabal points. These are not Cabal points. I spend points for this, I spend points for that, that's dead. That's really funny. That's just 40k in a nutshell, I love it. As I mentioned before, the way he says it, look, I spend points for this, I spend points for that, that's dead. Sorry, it just tickles me. That's 40k in a nutshell. As I mentioned before, the terrain rules had already been explained to me at length during my first game. This guy felt the need to repeat those rules every single time he placed a model behind a ring cover. Eventually, he moves Magnus forward and doing his thing, which blows up one of my battle tanks. In my turn, I announce, I'm targeting Magnus with my Vanquisher. Okay, well, the reason why he's explaining cover is because he's trying to set a precedent for how it works during the game. So you can challenge it if you want while he's explaining it. Do you know what I mean? That's why he's doing it. He's behind cover. He smugly states, I have a clean line of sight to him from here, I responded, pointing it out. Impossible. I placed him there so that he couldn't be targeted by your tanks. Dude, I can see him right through here. I point a line with my finger. He then pulls out a laser pointer and asks me what point of the model the Vanquisher can see. I kneel down to eye level and say, I can see his legs, loincloth, stomach, chest, face, horns, hair, and his wing and staff are sticking out over there too. He checks with his laser. Clearly obvious. He checks again. Hasn't changed. Checks again and sighs. Alright then, go ahead. Well, yeah, I see where you're both coming from here. Do you know what I mean? He hasn't seen the angle you can see. That's all that's happened here, right? And he's checked and rechecked and rechecked, and he's like, I'm sure that wasn't an angle before, but now it is. Okay, fine, move on. The Vanquisher knocked Magnus down to 3 wounds, and he was absolutely furious. He then discarded all attempts at being friendly and became extremely cutthroat, second-guessing every little thing I did. I just played along, uncaring about his obsession, and then the strangest thing happened. One of the other tables was behind a small railing just above my table. Those players were discussing something random, and then COVID was mentioned. My opponent suddenly dropped what he was doing to give his opinion on the pandemic. Oh no. I ignored it until he tried to bring me into the conversation. I said my small piece, which was completely at odds with his own theory, and he really felt the need to let me know how wrong I was. To my surprise, the other 2 guys began defending me with a very stern tone. It wasn't long before their faces were turning red as their voices grew louder. I caught a glance of my second opponent looking over with confusion. I shrugged. Finally, my opponent said, we should stop this argument before it gets worse. And he finally returned to our game. In short, I lost every game and came in dead last. I packed my stuff, said goodbye to my second opponent and his girlfriend, and went home. I called Nick on the ride back and discussed the events of the day. When I brought up the Thousand Suns player, he had a theory. He thinks the Thousand Suns player had been practicing games on Tabletop Simulator and had been pre-planning all of his moves and measurements, but it might not have occurred to him that tables get bumped and bounced throughout a day of gaming and all of his perfect angles might not exist in the moment of gameplay. I was able to get in another game in 2 days, an hour in the opposite direction. I actually won against an Admech army. I took a few pictures of all of these games, I'll include them with some of my completed Krieg. Anyways, thanks for all you do, and keep up the excellent work. Okay, a very understandable hobby nightmare. I'm going to be honest with you. Let's look at some Krieg, shall we? Very nicely painted models. Very nice, very strong colours. They should be on the same base, though. Unless you're doing them from different worlds. Ah, the full army up there. Cool, cool, cool. I wouldn't mind seeing that in a better resolution. That's lovely. Very nice. And your battle against the Tower player here. This is cool. We actually get to see what was going on. So we get to see the Tower player and the and yourself squaring off. Dude, that's a lot of firepower you've got there. Oh my god. Oh my days. That is a lot of firepower. Okay, that's for the next hobby nightmare. Okay, so we'll leave that one up for now, and we'll go on to our next hobby nightmare, shall we? It is with Onyx, who says, and Onyx has sent me this in from a while ago, but I've only just gotten around to it now, man. Sorry about that. It's mainly because, well, the mailbag's full. So, you know, if your hobby nightmare doesn't quite fit one day, we'll save it for when it does fit. Do you know what I mean? The theme of the day. Anyway, Onyx says, "Hello, Mr. Exile. Hello. You can call me Nicholas, or you can call me by my Discord name, Onyx. Before I start on my pseudo-ramble and a sort of excuse for a story, I wanted to thank you for helping me and potentially others for broadcasting our view of the hobby and the many events and moments that happen within this wonderful life. I just joined your Discord, and as part of my New Year resolution, it is to reach out to more of the Warhammer community to play some more games. More than the 5 games during the summer anyway. I have a small tale about a hobby that may not be as interesting as other stories that I've read, but nevertheless, talking about experiences may help or show others how to grow and nurture a good community for themselves and those neighbouring them. Alright? I have some photos attached to my email with one of the most recent games I played with the boys and my lady. So, this is the prologue in 6th edition, 2012 to 2013-ish, my introduction as a Warhammer 40k fan. I was introduced to Warhammer when I was about 12 or 13 when I played a video game known as Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine. Yeah, the sequel's out this year sometime, I think it's next month. I thought of it as delightful and extremely fun, with the banter with the orcs and the chaotic twists towards the latter half of the game. Of course, being so young, I thought the idea was so original, but there is always a chaos twist whenever there are other factions involved with Space Marines and that. Yeah, there is. That's something that's annoying. It's never just Space Marines against orcs or Space Marines against bloody Tyranids. There's always got to... The chaos have always got to turn up at some point. It was them all along. You know, oh god, here we go again. One day, a chap of mine invited me and a few other lads out for a birthday party and I said, of course I'll go. I then was dropped off later that week by my mother at the given address, and it was at some strip mall. Okay. He mentioned that we were going to do some activities such as laser tag and cake, but I didn't see the place, so I looked around a bit. He then shouted my name, and I saw him waving for me to approach him in front of a silly looking store. I didn't know that this store would eventually change my life. It had a big sign in front of the shop in big letters spelling out Warhammer. And I thought it was just some sort of D&D or medieval type of store with knights and dragons and stuff. We walked into the store, and my mouth must have hit the floor, because I seemed to inhale everything the store was throwing at me. I saw dioramas of battles with these men in power armor fighting evil and twisted spacemen in similar power armor, and I thought it was the most awe-inspiring battle I've ever witnessed. The store was huge, and had many games and people painting and doing other things that were neat and involved in the hobby. A man with a Games Workshop shirt approached us and asked if my friend was the birthday boy. Don't say that. If you work for Games Workshop, makes fun of you as the birthday boy. It's like, no. Get away with your creepy fingers and stuff. I don't know. I just had a Dracula moment there of him just looking like that in a Games Workshop t-shirt. He smiled and said, "Yeah, today's my birthday." He sat us down at a painting table and then handed us a Space Marine each and told us to paint the models however we wanted. I was a bit of a newbie when it came to the setting of Warhammer, and I didn't get what everything meant, or nor did I understand what it stood for. It is just that this is the year 40,000, and there are these super soldiers fighting evil and corruption. Fair enough. To me, it was like Halo, but set further in the future, with a lot more complexities and a lot more dark. Yeah, pretty much. I then looked at the available paints, and thought it would be cool to paint him a grey-silver, like he was a knight or something. I must have thought of him being chivalrous. I then painted him in this one colour, and if it was a bit of a botched job, I was artistically inclined at this time, so it's not like I knew any better. Okay. The employee looked a little disappointed in my lack of creativity, but still encouraged that the Space Marine was mine, and I was allowed to do what as I pleased with it. Okay, not the best way to be a Games Workshop person. Yeah, it's rubbish, but you know, it's yours, I guess, so you can do what you want with it. No, dude, this is not how you do an introduction. You do an introduction by giving an introduction. You sit the person down, and you show them how to paint Warhammer. You don't just give them models and walk away and come back and go, that's rubbish. No. My friend then told me that we were now leaving and going to do some laser tag. I got up in excitement, and the man who helped us exchanged a hand wave goodbye. It was a pretty fun meeting. My friends and family and I had loads of enjoyment at this party, and it was all having a good time. Something that may bring the mood down is he invited a few chaps to go to this party, but only I showed up. Ah. My friend was sometimes odd or a little over-enthusiastic on nerdy things, but he was a good guy, so I know that's what mattered more than anything about his character. After the party, my mother picked me up, and I told her about the store with all these Space Marines and rat guys with guns. She thought it sounded like a wizard or something, so I walked her back to the store. She thought the hobby as a whole was very creative and asked me how much it cost. I looked at the back of some of the boxes, and a handful were only $20-ish. Oh, back in the day. It's not crazy expensive, but not super cheap either. I picked up rat ogres, and she asked me if I wanted them. I said no. I told her I wanted the guys with the blue armor over there, and proceeded to point out the Space Marine wall. I picked up a Space Marine kit, and it was $65 fucking. I told her as such. I said it's a little unrealistic to get just 5 soldiers for that much. Oh, my sweet summer child. You know, fast forward 10 years, you know what I mean? We then left the store, and I wouldn't pick up the hobby until 7 years later. I love the fact that you literally told your mother, no, it's too expensive, and walked out. Man ahead of his time. 9th edition 2020. My hobby and the nightmare. Alright. Years after I was introduced to Warhammer, I was reintroduced to it by my cousins. My older cousin played Blood Angels. Our other cousins played Death Guard, and his little brother played Necrons. They invited me to join them, and I of course said yes, and I would learn about the universe proper. After some research, I then chose to play as the Imperial Guard, and would eventually play as Orcs. I then would watch countless videos on how to play and where to start the hobby, and I saw there were a few Warhammer stores near my area. After researching, I looked through my old journals and realised I went to such stores when I was 12. I brought this information to my mother and reminded her of the event, and she expressed some sorrow to me that the store had taken me she had taken me to years ago, and the laser tag place too, were now shut down. I was worried and would not long after make a pilgrimage to the store's corpse. It was barren, and all the memories that store must have brought were only that. Memories. I would go to one of the Warhammer stores during the hours nearby it was supposed to be operating, and when I showed up, it seemed unattended, and I guess the owner or worker didn't show up. I only waited about 20 minutes and returned to the store after doing some errands I had in an hour or so later, and there was still no sign of life. Yeah, he could have been on his lunch. People did that to me all the time. I'd go out for my lunch, I'd go and pick up some lunch, like a half a Subway or something, you know? And I'd have to close the store for lunch, and there'd be people outside going, "Where were you?" I'm eating. Right? It's my lunch break. I'm supposed to take an hour. I only take half an hour. You get off my case. Just wait. You know what I mean? The opening times are right there on the door when I take my lunch. Anyway, I left for home feeling somewhat defeated, and I was still determined to do Warhammer 40,000. I would eventually make my way to another store and would in turn meet who I thought at the time was a nice chap, who was the only staff member who worked there. Let's call him Elijah. Elijah would present me with the technical parts of Warhammer and how his store and the company operate. Paraphrasing him, it was along the lines of, and I quote, "So you pick an army with the rule of cool, you buy the army from us, and afterwards you build, paint, and then maybe even play with them." Well, yeah, pretty much. Though the idea of the whole thing would be very intimidating to me with the way that he explained it. I bought the 9th edition core book from Elijah, thanked him for helping me understand the hobby side of Warhammer, and set off home to read the behemoth of a book. I would relay my desire to get into the hobby with some friends from whence I was in school, and some other friends I had made through work and other mediums of life. I would later return to Elijah's store and purchase the Space Marine Codex, so I may fully learn the rules of an army and how to properly partake in a game. I then invited my friends who were interested in playing Warhammer, and we would find the game with we would play the game with bottle caps and as our models. True poor hammer is what I've heard other hobbies described. So again, the writing of this is starting to get more and more jumbled. True poor hammer is what I've heard other hobbies described what we did as. We just did some games with some terrain we made out of rocks, popsicle sticks, and 3 bricks. It was quite unstylistic for sure, but was semi-responsible. Okay, oh, dude, come on. It was quite unstylistic for sure, but was semi-responsible because I didn't want myself or my friends to sink an unreasonable amount of money into something we weren't sure of. Okay, fair enough. After a few games, I wanted to clear some rules up, so my friend and my girlfriend came with me to the Warhammer shop and asked Elijah how to play the game properly, and we would ask him for clarity. He in turn took us to the introduction board and taught us how to play with scenarios he would set up, and we started to make sense of the order of operations on the small but needlessly complex terrain rules. We thanked him and looked around the store, and we then met a fellow hobbyist. His name was Noah, and he was a little normal but a typical nerd type. Okay? Overweight, pale, and smelled a little too much of Nurgle's rot. He was pleasant to talk to though, and he said if we ever have a game with some real models, he'd be happy to help us play better. I agreed with him and said I hoped to see him around. I would call Elijah and ask him if I could book a game, but I didn't have any models. Alrighty. He obliged and said the store had some models and we were welcome to use them. I then added I wanted to book it for about 6 people, and he said, yeah, the more the merrier. That's a cool Games Workshop manager, that he's letting you use the store models. That's pretty cool. We showed up at the time we agreed on, and we talked about the game and what the objectives were. Then Noah showed up, and Elijah explained that Noah would guide us on how to play. We all agreed and the game started. It was Tyranids versus Ultramarines. We split into teams, and I said I would watch the game since I wanted to observe, and I played with my cousins not long before. Noah's team consisted of himself, my girlfriend, and my other friend. As for the other group, it was everybody else in my party. As the game unfolded, so apparently did Noah's deodorant, or lack thereof. It was completely permeating the area we were at, and I found it wasn't going to leave or change. I used to be a certified nursing assistant, so bad smells were not so intolerable to me, but I couldn't say that for my other friends. Noah wasn't a very great teacher either, and would only instruct my girlfriend on what to do and how to do it. Yeah, I wonder why. I found it a little odd, but not unreasonable. Perhaps it was the fact a woman was on his team playing the game he loves and his models. We played about 3 turns and our book time was up. I learned a lot from observing the game, but my friends seemed to have not gotten the same luxury. We talked with one another, and they had fun, but wanted to do their armies and models rather than play the game. They didn't want to spend a grand on a decent army, so we looked around the store, and there was a game called Kill Team. My friend AJ told us how it's a small-scale version of 40k, and how it would be significantly cheaper than doing a 40k army. I obliged, and I asked Elijah about the game, and if there were any updates or if there were going to be any for the new edition. He said that there may be, but he doesn't know if or when there'll be a new edition of it. I bought the Kill Team core book. I also bought the Start Collecting Astra Militarum, and my girlfriend brought the Adepta Sororitas Codex. A few days later, I talked to my friend, whose name is also Nick, and he told me that over a week ago, Kill Team was officially announced as a thing. I was upset that buying this needlessly expensive book and that it was soon going to be obsolete. I wanted to still give Elijah the benefit of the doubt. I then booked a painting session and my friends and I were going to buy models, build them and paint them. He didn't seem very enthused at the idea looking back, but he said the time I requested was adequate. This has actually happened to me with Warhammer 40,000. So my manager sold a copious amount of 7th edition towards the end of 7th edition because he wanted to get rid of it because he knew 8th edition was coming. And so he sold a whole slew of Dark Vengeance box sets only for 8th edition to be announced. He then fielded, or maybe I should say I fielded, several irate phone calls from people saying, look, I paid for this a week ago, it was something like £80, why didn't you tell me the thing I bought was going to be fucking obsolete a month later? You know, like we have to field calls like that all the time. Be very careful, if you're not, you know, in the hobby, be very careful when you buy certain products. Right? I have a friend who got into Imperial Agents at the end of 7th edition, thinking that he'd finally found the army he wanted to do, only for that army not only to be nuked because an entirely new game came out, a new edition came out, but that army didn't return. Imperial Agents didn't return for 8th, so he had no army now. Right? Again, be very careful, because there are unscrupulous people like this out there who will take your money and, you know, get rid of their useless stock on top of it. My friends and I showed up a little early, and we thought we should all get a coffee before heading in as we got back, and we still had 5 minutes to spare, and Elijah was still not there. We proceeded to wait for another 20 minutes, and there was still no sign of him. I attempted to call him and left him my information to reach me, and we all decided to head to a more local shop my other cousin would frequent when he was in town. All 8 of us showed up to this small place, and the few folks who were working there were really ecstatic to have us all be in there. We introduced ourselves, then we talked about what recently transpired, and they were sympathetic to our dilemma and would even give us a discount on their Warhammer models and codexes if we wanted it. Then, almost without hesitation, we proceeded to buy a troop unit for our respective armies. We then headed back to my garage, where I set up a painting party with some supplies I already had from painting with some models I'd acquired previously through my cousins. So the epilogue. After my little fiasco with the troubled Warhammer store, my friends and I would start playing games at my house, and it is a mix of a garage Warhammer and Poorhammer. I would get in a few 3D printers and then print a few armies for myself. I wanted the spice of life variety when playing the games, since I liked almost all aspects of Warhammer and its universe. We now semi-regularly play narrative games that are semi-balanced, and in these games there's a fog of war, so I can make surprises and make them adapt to their situation and make them think about what they'll bring. Okay, alright, cool. So what I'm starting to get from this Hobby Nightmare is this guy just bailed on you, right? You never finished off that Hobby Nightmare. You just said, yeah, we went to another store because this guy didn't turn up. Well, did he ever turn up? What happened? Right? Is Elijah still there? Who knows? We could warn people not to go to that Warhammer store. Anyway. In the way we play, they have goals to accomplish, such as re-establishing communications with the greater force, demolition, and even escorting models and other bits across the terrain. I found it more fun than when we started playing and learning the rules, since it was points and turns. Playing it more narrative and freestyle with a feel more interactive and each... Okay, dude, you've lost the plot with some of this writing, sorry. I love how this hobby has helped me be better with life in general. Good, I'm happy. There are certain parts where I like, if we're getting into it about, 20 minutes in and all of the sentences are all hickledy-pickledy, I need to just skip ahead. But I'm really glad it's making you better with life in general. I'm sorry this is a little bit rambly, and I'm not too much of a great writer. That came on cue, didn't it? Well, it's alright, man. Don't worry about it. It's fine. But just understand that, if the Hobby Nightmare gets a bit too hickledy-pickledy, I will just skip a bit to go to the next bit. So I'm not reading it like, it makes it really hard to listen to. I do have other stories of the hobby, but they are more of what happened in the games and not nightmares as such. As the time my friend shot a Tyranid Hierophant with a plasma cannon and ended up blowing up my other friend's heavy melter since he was stood that close to it when it went off. I could also go into more detail on how we play the games, since we play some interesting house rules, which I've tweaked a lot over the first year since we started playing. Cheers, mate. Alright, do any of you guys in the comment section have interesting house rules that you use? Let me know. Let me know. One of mine was, back in the day, was that I would only let, we only had hero units. They could only be harmed or you know, killed by other hero units. So you could actually, you know, fire down a hero unit with normal models, right? But at the same time, the last blow had to come from a opponent hero unit. And that hero unit could be a squad commander, it could be whatever. Do you know what I mean? It didn't have to be your general. Yeah, we would kind of do that just to make sure that, you know, heroes fought heroes sort of a thing eventually. And it was a really cool duel that we ended up having. Didn't always work out, you know, because we'd have guard players there who would literally, you know, fire down Gilliman or somebody until they had nearly no wounds left, and then were just like, okay, and then my last hero, which is a lieutenant, just pings one wound off of him, and that's the end of Gilliman. Do you know what I mean? But it's still made for better games, in my opinion. So did you do any weird house rules back in the day? Let me know in the comment section down below. I love you all a long time, and I'll speak to you tomorrow for some more Hobby Nightmares. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye now.